Velina mekelo ya kako apo, aloha nui kako, aloha. Welcome to Bishop Museum, and thank you for joining us this evening. We have an amazing group of Kanaka Oiwi that are sharing with us many insightful things. My name is Brandon. I am the Vice President for Public Programs here, and I just want to again mahalo all of you for being here, for giving us time and space to share with you some of the things that we are doing as a collective here at Bishop Museum. I want to acknowledge in our room Joe and Dean, Joe Wilson, Dean Hamer in the back, as well as Kumuhina Leimoana Wangkalu. They are three of four curators of our most recent exhibit, the Healer Stones of Kapaemahu. Our fourth curator, DeSoto Brown from the Bishop Museum. And this panel, this conversation tonight is just one of the many themes that they, as a curatorial team, have extracted from the Mauliola of Kapaemahu, and gives us great pleasure to present this. So at this time, I do want to introduce our moderator for tonight's discussion, and I'll turn it over to him shortly. Dr. Landon Opunui is a native Hawaiian and functions as a naturopathic physician that weaves the traditional views of Hawaiian health with scientific understanding of plants and the human body by integrating traditional, natural, and modern medicine to restore health. Dr. Opunui is the medical director of Napu'uwai and is the first naturopathic physician in history to be appointed medical director of a federally funded Native Hawaiian health care system, where his team has designed an innovative Native Hawaiian integrative health center that provides culturally responsive interdisciplinary health services, programs, and resources to the rural island communities of Moloka'i and Lanai. Practicing what he preaches and teaches, Dr. Opunui leads by example, modeling Mauliola and to his ohana, staff, patients, and community. Dr. Opunui is also an adjunct professor at Chaminade University and serves as a board member of the traditional Hawaiian healing nonprofit Hui Mauliola. Please welcome Dr. Landon Opunui. Aloha.
Mahalo for that introduction and that powerful oli. As we set forth this evening a forward focus that is grounded in our history, our people, the traditions and practices of the ancestors that come before us, we celebrate, we honor, we uplift, and we stand behind our youngest panelist, our future. I invite Hiʻikapu to provide an introduction and to introduce our title, theme, and inspiration for our discussion in Tutu's Kitchen this evening.
Aloha. O Erof Mendaka Hamke Kane or Korean Kianani Marking Kavahine, no Pulawa, Hanau Mela or Kikameka Kamekalani Hamhe Kane. Or Alan Thomas Kanoa Senior Kane na Fastikolo Kaiki Lima, no Pulawa, Hanau Mela or Shane Uilani Lima Hevahine. O Kikameka Kamekalani Hamke Kane na Shane Uilani Lima. No Pulawa a Hanau Mela o Vau o Hiʻikapu Kola Kaiki Kamlehua I Kalamola Hamlima. E Pula Mai Kalani Mai Olaka Hana Hamlima. O Vau o Hiʻikapu Hamlima, and this is my lineage. Helm, Koko, Halualani, and Lima, Kikahuna Kalaluhi, and Kanoa. I'm in Papa Eono, o Kekula o Kuala Pu'u. And I live in Kuala Pu'u. I was raised on Molokai from the shores of Halava all the way to the shores of Paku Mauliola. And I was also raised on Kaupapalo'i o Ka'amola, Kalamaula, and Anahaki. I go to Mo'olapa'au o Kapa'o Lonopuha me Anakale Keola. And our team are Mauliola no na hanauna, because we're all still practicing our health and well-being of our kupuna for all generations, past, present, amo loa aku. Mahalo.
Mahalo, Hiʻikapu, great job. I have the pleasure to introduce the remainder of our esteemed panelists, beginning first with our Haku Ho'oponopono, Ku'ume Aloha Gomes. When she was born, her tutuwahine, Loke Kanuha Kumohone, gifted her with the inoa that would determine her life's work of healing. Ku'umea Aloha, she said to her makuahine, hers will be a life of healing. At the age of 5 years old, she was introduced to Ho'oponopono by her tutuwahine, who herself was a practitioner of Haku Ho'oponopono and La'au Lapa'au. Sitting quietly on the floor and listening and watching her kokua others to talk about pilikia, look closely at the eha, tukala and mihi, and restore pono in the ohana, she grew up being that child who talked to Akua. Help soothe friends' eha, and even listen to adults venting. These early experiences, the inoa kuleana and Tutu's preparation shaped her education and career choices. Mentors Anake Lynette and Anakala, Likeke Paglinawan, Earl Kava'a and many others, and the Aina Kaho'olave and Keolo Nahihi anchored her in Mauliola. Today, with the Aumo Kuleana for healing through Kapa Kalihi Kaya Ulu, with a commitment to put a healer in every home, she continues to share this Ike Kupuna with Haumana and make herself available to Ohana and other Po'e to Ho'oponopono where needed. Next, representing Ai Kupele, we have Sharon Ka'iulani Odom. Ka'iulani Odom has been involved in the area of Native Hawaiian health for the past 20 years. She has developed educational media for print, television, and screen. Her specialty is in aikupele, nutrition from a cultural perspective. Her work involves communities, schools, and most importantly, ohana. During the last 10 years, in an effort to expand her perspective on health, she has been immersed in the study of ho'oponopono, la'au lapa'au, and lomi lomi. It is her goal to support Native Hawaiian communities, to connect with the ike and practices passed down by their ancestors, fostering healthy lifestyles for future generations. Ka'iulani currently works not far from here at Kokua Kalihi Valley Health Center as the Roots Program Director. Roots' goal is to bring community members together as a part of a larger social network, centering around food as a source of nourishment, identity, and connection. Project activities build upon bonds between community members as they cultivate food and medicine, cook together, share traditional practices of food preparation, and eat together in common spaces. The concept of malama aina, to care for the land, refers to a reciprocal relationship. For the land to supply food and sustenance, we must in turn take care of it. Teaching the community about the culture and the wisdom of our ancestors provides a natural segue into education on nutrition and healthy living. Appreciating your heritage is a healthy practice in and of itself. Through honoring our culture and ancestors, we honor ourselves. Ka'iulani. And last and certainly not most least, we have Kumu Lapa'au Keola Ka'iu Kawaiʻula Iliahi Chan. Keola Chan is the Kumu Lapa'au of Kapa o Lonopuha, Academy of Native Hawaiian Healing Traditions. His vision is set upon establishing a healer in every home. He currently serves as the executive director of Ahakane Foundation for the Advancement of Native Hawaiian Kane. The overarching goal of this organization is to strengthen the Native Hawaiian community through nurturing and perpetuating the traditional Kane roles and responsibilities that contribute to the physical, mental, spiritual, and social well-being of Hawaiian Kane, their families, and communities. Previously, Keola was a research analyst at the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, where he worked towards the advancement of Native Hawaiians in the areas of health and education. He also founded Hui Mauliola, a nonprofit organization that seeks to promote and improve the health and well-being of our communities through empowering and providing access to quality care and educational opportunities. In 2021, Keola was honored as the Educator of the Year by the Native Hawaiian Education Association. As an entrepreneur, Keola established Kamakanui Aha Ilono, LLC, where he builds health-based curriculum and programs statewide to provide access to families interested in becoming stewards of Mauliola. Keola. Aloha e and e komo mai. We invite you to join us in Tutu's Kitchen as we kuka talk story about the modern day embodiments of our traditional healing practices that connect us to who we are and where we come from, which will shape our future. Aloha e, so good to see you all. Mahalo Ka'iulani for bringing this beautiful spread in front of us. Please dig in. We all come from far and we all come with our own stories, much of which are paths that have crossed. I was hoping we could begin our discussion in Tutu's Kitchen tonight by sharing a little bit about what guided you and brought you here this evening.
Aloha. So I was thinking about this question because I knew you were going to ask, and as I've gotten older, more experienced, I realized that there are many things throughout my life that set me up to where I sit today. So whether it was sitting on the bus next to a friend who was going to Kailua to take a hula class, and I began my journey in hula, or taking I needed an elective when I was a Hawaiian language major, so I took a nutrition class, and that steered me a whole nother way. Or meeting up with Herbert Ho, or taking, meeting up with Keola and learning under Keola. Like, I feel like I've been guided by my kupuna the whole time. But what I was always really passionate about was the health of our lahui. So whether it's in Aipono or in our birthing work, I feel like I've been set up a long time ago to do this work, and that the experiences throughout my lifetime have led me on this journey, but they've given me the knowledge, and it hasn't always been easy. There's definitely been struggles, and definitely been times where I'm like, oh, maybe I want to do something else. But in the end, every day, I do what I do, not because I'm getting paid, but because I love what I do, and I feel like my kupuna is sitting right there, and I answer to them. I don't answer to anybody else. I answer to them in choosing what I do, where I'm going to go, how I'm going to treat people, what I'm going to say, is I know that they're right there, and I need to make them proud. And so that's kind of how I ended up here today.
And for me, it's like, you get to come out from Keola, you can say no. You gotta go right there. But also, it's like, sitting in Tutu's kitchen is for me coming full circle with my Tutu. At my age, at 77, and I started at 5 years old. So that's part of what brings me here. The other part, of course, is our young people. And also in Hawaiian tradition, it's like it's kupuna, you need to share your ike. The ike kupuna has to be shared. It was given to you, not for you to leave with, but for you to pass on. So that's what also brings me here to this table, is the fact that we're sitting here and we're sharing our ike, our knowledge with other people. And that's really, really important. Our young people of today, I just so mahalo them. I have so much, my heart is so piha with love for them, because if not for them, we cannot share. And we cannot make ourselves light to grow wings and fly away. We are beholding to them as the elders, and it's that kind of connection that we need. So that's what brings me to the table, and the love for the lahui, the love for our people, the love for the healing that needs to occur. Mahalo.
Aloha, aloha kako. Before I go into this answer, I just want to introduce Ui Lima. She's the mother of Hiʻikapu. I didn't want you guys just looking at her and not wondering her role. She got to give moral support and physical support. Hiʻikapu was really nervous, but he's doing a great job. I also want to take this time to acknowledge Hina Wangkalu, who is she's the impetus behind Kapaemahu and really these discussions over the next several weeks that Bishop Museum is supporting. And I just want to mahalo her for her vision in bringing this mo'olelo to the forefront, but more importantly, the healing traditions of Hawaii. I find like many of my peers tonight, I was very similar. But in particular, what got me started in this path was becoming a father. I was really nervous. I did not know what to do as a father when I found out I was gonna have my first son. And so there was a fire that was lit under me to go and learn these healing practices. And I was fortunate to have great kumu, great teachers and mentors that not just shared, but they allowed me to, after studying, pointed me to the next person to go and learn from. And my keiki came just in time. My daughter Hau'ola, my daughter Nahuina, and my son Kaha'i. Mahalo to their auntie for bringing them. But they are and will continue to be the fire within that encourages me to ensure that our people, our community, and our families are in a better place. And they are the ones that remind me of that. So, and that's why I'm here tonight. Yeah.
I don't have much of a story, but I came here to learn, and so the next generation that comes, I can teach too. And Uncle Keola chose me to be here on Tutu's table, so mahalo, Uncle Keola, and that's it.
Hiʻikapu, you come the furthest from all of us. You come all the way from the moku of Molokai. Can you tell us what it's like to live on Molokai and what your connection to Aina there means?
We're connected to the Aina, and it's not like living anywhere else because it's a small community and you get to know them better, and it's fun too because you will always have to get dirty, and yeah, that's it.
So what you talk about, Hiʻikapu, and all of you tonight at the table is about connection. It's about pilina. And I remember a kumu of mine telling me about a rope as a symbol of pilina, which are interwoven braids that connect us to the past, the present, and the future that collectively makes us stronger together. So can you maybe tell us a little bit about what pilina means to you and why pilina is important in traditional healing?
So for me, that pilina, that connection, the importance of it is that we are not alone, right? We are not alone. You know, we come from a generation of people. We come from roots. We're not just one branch. We're connected to the tree, to the roots. We come with a history. We come, so that moku auhau is really important. Our genealogy is really important. That's one connection. We have spiritual connections. In daily life, it's like we always talk to Akua. You know, it's like you don't do anything unless you talk to Akua and you ask for guidance and you mahalo Akua every morning when you get up. Sometimes when things get hard, you talk to Akua and that's your answers. And you talk to your kupuna that have passed. You know, that's who you're connected to too. And then there's, in daily life, you walk up to, you see a kanaka or Eva, you see another kanaka, it's like, you look at that beauty, you look in their eyes, you know, and you just say, wow, that's another beautiful person, beautiful kanaka. And you can feel that person. You can feel them because they're connected to you. We're not disconnected. And the same with the Aina. We're part of this Aina. So when there's like big development, there's eha in you. You hurt because you are part of it, and you cannot be divorced from that. When you travel and you miss, what do you miss? You know, not only do you miss your ohana, but you miss your Aina. And the food, you know, you're connected to that. So it's like we're never alone. We're all part of something. We're pilina to that. You know, we're interconnected, and we cannot be separated from that. I'll stop there. You know, when you ask Kupuna a question, we go on and on and on. We tell Mauliola, right? So I'm going to stop for now.
I think that for me, the Pilina is an indigenous lens of looking at things. We've become very siloed in our thinking nowadays, and especially in health. And so when I think about food and our connection to food, you know, I have a Western degree in dietetics, but I also have my indigenous way of looking at food. And so oftentimes it's about, you know, you need to lower your blood sugars, or you need to do this, or you need to do that. And that's not what motivates people all the time. It's really the connections that they have. And so in our program, we look at it and we say, our food connects us to our land, it connects us to our ocean, it connects us to our spirit, it connects us to our kupuna, it connects us to our stories, it connects us to each other. And when this Pilina is broken, when these connections are broken, that's what makes us unhealthy. And so when we're looking at how to be healthy, it's really about the connections that we're making. And, you know, we took our time and we went around the islands and we asked people, and so for everybody out there, just close your eyes for 1 minute and think about the time when you felt the most healthiest. What's your story? What were you doing? Who were you with? When was it? Okay, now open your eyes. For how many of you out there, raise your hand if it was today. Today and this time, you feel the most healthiest. Okay, raise your hand high if it's today. But for many of us, it's not today. It was a time pass or some other time. And so I had to think to myself, what is it that we're walking around in this world, we're living in this world where today is not the day we're feeling our most healthiest? What's wrong? And so a lot of it comes back to we've become very disconnected. We're not even touching the land that grows our food every single day. We're not communicating and telling our stories and telling people we love them, or, you know, listening to their stories. And so what do we need to do in our culture and our society to make sure that when I say, tell me your story about being healthy, you're telling me your story about today. It's not about when I was a young kid or when I didn't have kids, or it's about today. That's why I do the work that I do, is I want everybody's stories to be about today.
You know, we're in a really important place here at the Bishop Museum, because they have been a really critical component of capturing and holding on and preserving a lot of the mo'olelo over time here at the Bishop Museum. Their publications are, if you're interested in Hawaiian healing, they have been pretty much the sole organization that has put out information around traditional healing. One of the things that you'll see because of those publications, and by talking with kupuna that are still around, is that this idea of pilina is critical, and it is the central point that brings all pieces together, because Hawaiian health and well-being is not an individual approach. It never was and can never be. The pilina between cultural practices in the traditional healthcare system was an integrated one. The way that health was looked at in the home, while the individual may be sick, you cannot just treat that individual if the home that they return back into is a sick environment. And so it was always around, and there's an entire practice of ho'oponopono that focuses around healing the entire family, not just the individual. And so if you're doing la'au lapa'au, your pilina to your environment, to the kinolau, to the waters, to the rain, to the minerals in the kai, to the various relationships that are critical for you to have with the different birds, the different fish, understanding their cycles. That pilina is critical to ensure that you are collecting those minerals, that la'au at its highest potency. And so the pilina is not just a word, it is a behavior, it is an act, it is a lifestyle. really, is what we're talking about. And it is the fundamental piece behind our culture, right? Aloha is just a word until you have somebody to share that aloha with, and that's the pilina we talk about. Most important, I would say, when we talk about pilina is the pilina which has been fleeting for many of us in our traditional practices, is the relationship with our environment when we talk about our akua and the multitude of akua. Those energies, those relationships that are fundamental in us beginning the healing process, because if you learn any form of healing, it starts with the akua and the pule. You cannot do treatment if you don't have that fundamental cornerstone pieces in place. And to do so, you have to have a relationship with those entities and those spaces and places. Yeah, mahalo.
And I think that spirituality, whatever your spirituality is super important to everything that we do. And we've also disassociated all of that. So our spirituality with food, for us as Kanaka, our food were kinolau forms of our akua. So when you ate those foods, you embraced all of the good things about it. And people will say, well, you know, that's so pagan. And my reply to that is, well, what happens when you go to church every Sunday? What do you do when you're eating that piece of bread? You're eating the body of Christ. Same thing when you drink the water, drinking the blood of Christ. So that spirituality is attached to this food that's only done on a Sunday in a built structure somewhere, whereas indigenous people, we understand the spirituality of our food was all the time. It connected us, like Keola said, to our environments, to our akua. So how we cared for the land, how we cared for the ocean, how we took care of our food, how we prepared our food, how we fed each other, was all connected to our spirituality 24/7. You know, it's really hard to find that spirituality driving through Jack in the Box or, you know, buying something in a store covered in plastic. And so again, that when we're talking about pilino, where is that connection? Where's that relationship that we have with all of these things that brought us health? And so spirituality is super important to all of it. And we don't think about that in many aspects. Everything is kind of siloed. Western health, I feel, can be siloed at times. We're not integrating all of the things together. We're looking at individual things. Like even for food, for eating healthy, we often run really good programs, and then we feed our kids chips and hot dogs. And it's like, why are we running all these Hawaiian programs and not understanding that feeding them good and teaching them about the food is just as integral to the program as learning olelo or learning culture or skills, that we need to continue to integrate all of this and keep those relationships strong in a holistic type of sense.
You know, tonight we started off with a pule, kawaya kane, that Kainoa Kiana Aina presented to you folks to open our evening. And it was important that we started with that pule because we are all being affected by tainted water right now, right? The relationship without water, none of us could live. It is that critical, and it is we are all made up of water, right? And so water is the conduit for our spirituality, right? And so it is important that we hold these things. It is not just water; it is life. And those relationships, our relationship to malama water, the kawaya kane, the waters of kane, are critical in our well-being. So iola oi, iola aue. In that being, that having life gives me life, right? It is not a one-way streak. It is not a linear path. And so this relationship that was presented tonight about kawaya kane is the whole hydrology of what life is about, right? That waters, where are they found? And it is imperative that we acknowledge that we are here because of these things around us and have that relationship, and those relationships be healthy. Because in ensuring those things, our water is healthy, our land is healthy, we ensure our well-being. Yeah?
And two, we cannot forget Papa and Wakea. Papa is our aina, from where we get our food, from where we get our sustenance. But Papa too is the foundation of who we are. We stand on Papa. Papa holds us up. I remember a time when I was about, how old was I? About in my 30s, and I was going through some very difficult time in my life, and I felt really unbalanced. And I remember being at home by myself, and I was in Pule for a little while, and it was still kind of like, oh, something's wrong. And then all of a sudden I had this feeling, go outside, and it was about this time of day, go outside. So I went outside and I sat down on the grass, and I put my hand down, and I felt kind of like, some warmth come into me. And I just sat there and I looked up at the sky and I felt the expansiveness of the sky. I saw the expansiveness of the sky and I felt like, wow, I felt like I was a part of that. And I took a deep breath. And then I put my hand back down again. And all of a sudden I felt the need to lie on this aina. And so I lay with my face down on my chest and my hands out. And then I felt this to-doom. And it was like the heartbeat of the aina and my heart in tune with it. To-doom. And I lay there for a while. And it felt so good. It felt so good. And it was like I was being restored again. And it was coming from the aina, and I fell asleep. And when I woke, it was dark. But I felt so rejuvenated because it was the aina. And that's why with the water, with the food that comes from the aina, with us who come from the aina, we cannot be separated. No matter where we go, no matter what we do, it is who we are.
So I have this small little ritual I do every single day, and everybody's got really busy lives, and we all have to think about things that make us feel healthy. But realizing that we work in buildings and we live in houses and we drive in cars every day, and sometimes it's long walks on beaches, and sometimes it's just going out and standing in the grass for a few minutes to make sure that my feet are touching the earth every single day in some little way. And so on some really busy days, it's just a few minutes outside, but I make sure that every single day I've touched the earth in some way. Thanks.
And it reminds me, I have a 2-year-old mo'opuna. And a few weeks ago, we went walking into Kamananui, Mauliola Valley. 2 years old. And he stopped and he took off his shoes. He took off his shoes, and with his little feet, he started walking, and he turned around and he looked at me and he smiled. And it was like he felt a part of that aina. And I thought, right on, right? That's what you guys do, always hammer the shoes, right?
Ku'umea Aloha and Ka'iulani, you talk about experiences of connection. I was hoping that you folks can share a little bit more about ways in which we can find more mana in connection and how we can malama our pilina.
That's a really good question, and I was thinking about that this afternoon too. And it comes in so many different ways. That interconnectedness. I drive in my car and I listen to Hawaiian music. And sometimes I cry because it just touches me so deeply to hear about the places, and the beautiful voices that are singing about the different places. And it's like honoring those mele and people who work so hard to prepare it, who think about it, who have a passion for it too. The same with oli, you know, and listening like tonight, listening to the oli and hearing that it's about place, it's about spirituality, it's about your connectedness and honoring that. You know, those kinds of treasures. Honoring what we consider to be our kupuna. And Keola talks about this too and reminds us that, like here at the Bishop Museum, you know, you have these things in the back of glasses, the cases, but there are ike kupuna. You know, they're things that are very, very precious to us. They're part of who we are. And it's our kuleana to malama that, to talk about it, to make sure our keiki understand it. We have kuleana to carry those things, to make sure that that knowledge about those pieces, to make sure that the knowledge about our aina, the knowledge about our connection to each other, that we pass that on. That's how we malama that. You know, we pass on pule, we pass on mele, we pass on oli, we pass on our knowledge about our ike kupuna. That's how we embrace it and we malama that. And the other thing I have to say is that we also need to malama our contemporary people of today, like Kumuhina, and the work she did with Kapaemahu, and she continues to do that. We need to embrace and malama people like that, like her, because they're continuing to bring our knowledge forward. They're continuing to give voice, visibility, and validating who we are. And if we don't do that, nobody else will.
For me, I feel that it's through our practices, that as we continue to practice more, that we build the mana, and this will continue on. And I'm thinking about our birthing classes. We do these birthing classes for Native Hawaiian couples, and we really talk about the connectivity to our kupuna and to the future. It's not just about ourselves in this day and time. And if we're really thinking about, is this land going to be healthy enough for food to grow on in 7 generations? And this ocean going to be clean enough for food in 7 generations? And our kids, is our lahui going to thrive? And that we're thinking about those far connections. You know, for the Aipono class, we remind them that as wahine, they have all the eggs in them, and the kane have all the sperm, but they're going to bear their children, and they're going to bear their grandchildren, they're going to bear their great-great-grandchildren, and so on. Like, so inside of them, they have all their future generations, right? So everything they eat every day is not just to nourish them. It nourishes the cells of their children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren and everybody else. And guess what? They hear what you're saying today. So you better say the right thing, because your great-grandchildren are hearing what you say. So say good and kind words to everybody. And they know what you're doing, because they're inside of you. So they know what you're doing every single day. And so if we think about health in that continuum, that it's not just about for me today, but that I am building my future of my ohana, because genealogy is very important to us. The other thing is that, you know, even when we're talking to the women about what to eat, it's about feeding this child our kupuna foods that are going to be grown on our aina, that are going to support our farmers, and we're creating this cycle. What she eats while she's pregnant, what she eats while she's breastfeeding, these are all super important for her. And so they're important to the farmers, they're important to the aina, and so all going back to that connection to all of the things around us, not just as individuals. And so I feel like the more we practice, the other thing is that we have a certain la'au that we make for mothers after they give birth, and it's on the third day, and we learned it from Ni'ihau, but we've never written it down. We've passed it, and what happened was when we were doing our research before we started having the classes, we saw the name of this la'au in a couple of books, but we didn't know what it was, and it was like, okay, we're going to keep going, but we're going to make sure that somewhere along the line we find out what it was. Then we found someone that would teach it to us, and with the thought that we hold it with the same integrity and respect as how she taught it to us. So again, we've never written it down. You want to make it, you show up the third day after your wahine gives birth, then we help you to make this la'au. But what was once a word in the book, we've helped almost 70 families make this la'au after birth so far. So our practice is going to thrive, it's going to live. And while they can't go out and teach it because they can again only teach it as we taught them, they're free to help their families. So when you're talking about a healer in every home, if we have people in every family that know how to make them. So for us, this is about the continuation of the, in just one generation, we lost a lot of our practices. Why? Because people wanted to go to the hospital like the white woman did. It was status to give birth in the hospital, and so our practices started to dwindle. And when they come to class, we have this question about, tell us about the birthing practices that are passed down in your family. And for many of them, they say, oh, we don't have any. And we say, go back and talk to your kupuna, go back and talk to your parent. And they come back the next class and they're like, oh, you know those pohaku, or you know the soup that my tutu made me? And so we have to tell the stories, we have to make these practices live, and we have to teach them, like you said, and that helps to bring them on into all of our, and will help it to continue on.
And it's like giving permission to people. It's like giving them that permission that they can do it, that they can acknowledge who they are, that they can acknowledge the history they come from, they can acknowledge their traditions. Because as you said, it's like, we're Kanaka O'iwi. We've grown up in this culture, this American culture. We live a duality, and if you look around us, it's like how many people, for instance, Ke'aumoku Street, a real primary street in Honolulu, but how many people know who Ke'aumoku was? Who's Ke'aumoku? Oh, the street? It's like giving us, our people, the permission to talk about it, to claim it, to make it yours again. That those kinds, the practices you're talking about too. And also the mana, the mana that also comes from our names. Yeah. How we've been named, why we've been named, what we have individually been named. Giving people permission to talk about that, to research that, to claim that, to touch that, to embrace that, because that is your generations going back, yeah, and that is the stuff that brings us to who we are today.
We was all talking about the connections we have with people, but we also have to have a connection with the aina to have a connection to the future and the past. That's all I have to say. Mahalo.
So it's becoming very clear to me that Pilina is integral to everything we are as Kanaka. Pilina is how we heal. Pilina is how we learn. And Pilina is how we pass on our legacies. Pilina also plays a really important role in our traditional healing practices. And Hiʻikapu, I understand that you've just began learning Lomi Lomi. Can you tell us a little bit more about maybe the difference between Lomi Lomi and massage?
I didn't really learn the difference of Lomi Lomi of massage, but I think Lomi Lomi is more of a Hawaiian way of massaging.
Maybe we can pass that question on to Keola next, if you can expand upon that. And if you also want to touch on the difference between la'au lapa'au and botanical medicine.
The foundational piece, again, I'll come back to this. Let me tell you, because I was just thinking, there was a time, I think it must have been in the 1998, I was in Hilo, and Papa Awai was giving a presentation. Papa Awai was one of our distinguished po'okela for la'au lapa'au. He was recognized throughout the state. He was giving a presentation. And in the presentation, I remember sitting in the audience, and the people that I was sitting around, they were there, and they kept talking when he was talking, and I could hear them saying, when he gonna share the recipe? When he gonna share the mixtures? When he gonna share how to make the la'au? It wasn't until years later, and I'm sitting here tonight, that I'm realizing the same things that Papa Awai was talking about, and that we're at this table talking about, because it's a critical missing piece in our healthcare system today, is the spirituality. Easy to talk about what the compound mixture would look like if you had one cough or you had an infection. That's the easy part. Anybody can do that. What really is the healing component is our spirituality. It is our relationship. It is the mana in the individuals and the collective environment that we are a part of. It is the spirit. And without that piece, healing does not happen. That is the foundational piece across every healing. We had, in traditional times, the Hawaiian healthcare system was made up of 32 practices, 32 individual practices. La'au lapa'au was just one. Lomi lomi was just one, right? One of those 32. Every single one of those practices was rooted and founded and grounded in Hawaiian spirituality. And without that, you're just doing massage. Without that, you're just doing herbal medicine. It is understanding the relationship of the me'ai, that is not just food, that is a kinolau, that there is a generational relationship that we have with that food, and a responsibility. Like I shared earlier, because if we malama that food, then that food gonna malama us, right? So that's why you hear about, oh, why are they talking about aina so much? Or how come they talking about getting in the dirt? Well, how about they talk about ho'oponopono and show us some lomi techniques? Because that's easy. Anybody can do that. A squeeze is a squeeze. You like me pound on some leaves outside. Anybody can do that. What they cannot do is have that, be able to pull forth the mana, the spiritual elements that reside in those plants, right? To pull forth, to either to move aside, to embed, right? To place upon, to heal, right? Or to remove ma'i from somebody. That is a spiritual act. That is more than just take the pill, see you in 3 days. So Hawaiian healing is foundational, like I keep saying. It's not just Hawaiian healing. Let me just also say, to extend it to every single practice in Hawaiian culture is spiritually rooted. You're going to sail to Tahiti, you're going to pule first, and you're going to pule when you get there, right? If you're going to eat, you're going to pule first, right? Every act, every hana that we did, you're going to plant, you're going to plant tomorrow, right? You're going to pule. You're going to take to make la'au, you're going to pule. It is the spiritual piece that makes it what it is. And we're not unique in that. All native peoples understand, all indigenous peoples know this. And for our Caucasian brothers and siblings, If they go far enough back, because Caucasia is not a place, right? When they go back to their origins, they're going to find the same mo'olelo as us. It's just been forgotten over time. And so when we have people come and say, oh, I like learn lomi lomi, I ask them, oh, what would it be in your culture, your ethnicity, from your aina? What was that? Because you know what, we all come from cultures where there was no Queen's Hospital down the road, there was no Long's drugs to get your medicine. We all come from a people that understood this critical relationship to environment and to spirituality. It is just, when you look on the timeline of things, it's just more recent in that timeline that we have been disconnected from the true spirituality of our relationship to each other and to our environment. And that bleeds into our work. And that, to me, is what is the difference between massage and lomi.
I think it's actually what's missing between Western and indigenous healing is that whole piece that Keola just talked about, the spirituality and the connections and everything, and that we are looking at, again, only a moment in time and not generationally, not at our history, not at our future. I mean, with Aipono or with eating healthy, I mean, if you look at the tables in front of us, I can tell you where every piece of this food came from, who grew it, what their story is, and you know, no pesticides, no chemicals, we care about the earth. And then I constantly have people coming in on the keto diet, you know, and it just drives me a little bit crazy because kalo connects us to hālau. You know, all of our cultural carbs, they're kinolau forms of an akua. And so when I think about a parent having to say to their family, oh, I cannot eat kalo or poi anymore because it's not healthy, it's not good for me. It's like, do you understand what you're really saying? Like, you're completely cutting that connection off. And it's not just to the food. It's, again, the food touches the aina, the spirituality, all of these things that are so important to us. How about just eating good carbs and good protein and some vegetables and fruits and like a balanced diet? But it's just, like I said, we've become so busy that we even go into stores and, you know, we want the filleted fish or the boneless skinless chicken, where, you know, we bring our families in, we give them a whole fish, we teach them how to cut it up, how to make soup out of, you know, the bones, how to make the fillets, all of these things. Is that we've just become so disconnected to our food system. And I had such great, I mean, COVID is awful, but I had such great hopes during COVID because people were making sourdough bread and they were growing their own vegetables and, you know, all these things that they didn't have time for before. And I'm slowly seeing it going back. And I'm like, what happened, you guys? We had this moment in time where we realized how important all these things were. Just the art of making things ourselves, to, you know, from scratch, the art of growing our foods, to having a garden, it's not being dependent on other people. And then we get back into our busy lives, and it's just like our health. You know, when we stop and take the time, we can take care of ourselves and our families and our community. And then when we go around, you know, working 50-hour jobs and taking our children to every single sport and music and everything else, and this becomes secondary. Our health becomes secondary. It's about getting to all of these things. So who can even think about spirituality when you're doing all of these kind of things? And so we have to bring that back into every single practice that we do.
Ku'ume aloha, maybe you can share some perspective on the difference between the practice of ho'oponopono and counseling or therapy.
You had to ask that question, right? So I worked for 19 years in community mental health and as a counselor in community mental health. So first of all, I don't want to diss Western traditions because it works for some people. But what I can say is, like, you know, as someone who, you know, worked in that field for a while, you know, you have your DSM-3, the Diagnostic Systems Manual, right? that you look at what is the diagnosis here and what is the treatment, right? You don't have that in Ho'oponopono, right? In the Western model, it's, the person is detached from the person who's come in to get the help. In Ho'oponopono, it's not like that. You're part of that family that's coming in, that is asking you to be haku Ho'oponopono. They know about you, they heard about you, they already trust you before you come in. Before you usually come to them, they're not coming to you. You're going to their house, usually. And the other thing is, for me and in my tradition, how I was raised, and I say that because there's so many different haku ho'oponopono, and people come from different traditions because they're trained different, they're raised differently, trained differently. So what the tradition I come out of is that ho'oponopono is premised on love. That's your foundation, which is really different from a Western model. You cannot tell your client, this is really premised on love. That's not how it is in Western tradition. But it's premised on love, and as a haku ho'oponopono, when you walk into that room, you see your family. When you walk into that home, you come with love, because you know that that's the healing that you come with. That's the beginning of the healing, is to touch people with that love, so that they too can make the connection that often is broken, which is really different in the Western model. You sit there, you listen, you kind of trying to figure it out, and then you recite back, or whatever. The words don't come to me right now. But in Ho'oponopono, you're with the people, you're with the family, you're seeing what's going on, you're seeing the eha, you're seeing, and the other thing is, too, that you're not there alone, that your kupuna are there with you, that akua is there with you. And you're drawing on that strength and that knowledge to be able to give to that family. Very different from Western models. Western model is DSM-3. Western model is what your training is in psychology and psychiatry and whatever. But in Ho'oponopono, it comes from your tradition of healing the family. And pulling on the many different resources around you, that oftentimes, even you're using metaphors of nature, metaphors of the tree, the plants, the flowers, the whatever, the vine. And that's in Ho'oponopono, very, very different from Western models. Western models don't, treatment modalities don't do that. And I see you nodding your head, so right? It doesn't do that. Fortunately for us, in our own healing practices, as you heard from people, we pull on our own resources. We pull on what's around us. We pull from the aina, we pull from the kai, we pull from the heavens, we pull from our generations back of us, to bring forward, to give us the ike to do this work, to continue to do the work. And you always know, like I always know, I am not sitting in that chair by myself. I am not there by myself. That I am being guided, right? I am being guided, and if I'm not clear about something, I'll just close my eyes and say a short pule, and then it comes, right? So That's really, so I hope I answered the question because it's really different from Western model.
So remembering and retelling and re-establishing our mo'olelo is a way that we can connect to the mana'o and the ike of the ancestors that come before us. And this Kapaemahu exhibit is a powerful demonstration of that. And it makes me remember mo'olelo that I once heard, the mo'olelo of Kovelo, that I know Keola can tell much better than me. Can you remind us what that story is about and why it's important to this discussion of Pilina?
There's this mo'olelo of Kovelo who was a young chief from the island of Kauai. And there's a point in the mo'olelo that he's kind of like challenged. And when he's challenged, instead of saying, in the challenge it was asked, who are you? Who is this young person in front of me? And his response was, he did not respond by saying who he was. He responded by saying who he comes from. So he responded by saying, here are all of my kumu. Here are all of my mentors. That's who you're going to deal with. You may see me in front of you, but I'm a culmination of those individuals that have come before me. And that's an important part in that mo'olelo, because it really, again, our understanding of the world is not a linear piece. It connects us. You've heard it several times. Those that have come before us, they didn't just die. They are interwoven into our world. When we sleep at night, we don't necessarily, the physical body sleeps. But the kino, what we call a kino wairua, the kino wairua ventures into the dream world, into our dream state, where we continue to learn and interact with those that have come before us. At the same time, what you see here today is we have a responsibility to bring those things of our past into the present to ensure that the next generation carries it forth. And so in Kovelo, him sharing that mo'olelo, sharing his genealogy, his mo'oku'auhau, and the formidable names that he was putting forth, that what he was trying to convey was, while you may see me, please understand that you're really going to be dealing with the 500 others that are behind me. Yeah.
Mahalo Keola for that. And it's very healing when you give people permission to do that. You know, when they can do that. With my haumana, when I asked them that question, like, who are you? I don't want to hear their moku auhau. What I want to hear is, who do they come from? Where do they come from? And so I asked them to share the mo'olelo of that. Because if they only do the moku auhau, then they're just repeating the names, but it's not really coming from inside. And what I want them to do is make it come alive. And you come alive by describing who you come from. So I come from my tutukane. I come from my tutukane Clement Kanuha, who at age 50 was sent to Kalaupapa. I come from my tutu Kani Clement Kanuha that I never saw. But I used to watch my tutu Loke sit at the table mixing poi, and tears would run down her eyes. As a child, I sat there watching. So it's those kinds of mo'olelo that you give people permission to tell, and when they begin to do that, their healing also starts occurring. So mahalo, Keola.
Working in Native Hawaiian healthcare, I'm just so inspired by this vision of a healer in every home, where we empower our kanaka, we empower our ohana, we empower our communities. And Hiʻikapu, you live this practice. Can you share a little bit about what the practice of healing is like in your hale?
It's interesting, kind of, and kind of funny. But you have to be engaged in what you're doing and have a good feeling on who you're working on. And you have to know how you're doing it and if you're doing it right. Yeah, I do healing. Like, I do massaging and lomi and laulapau, and that's it.
I dream of a day when every household is like Hiʻikapu's. What do you think the impact would be if we transform the health of our ohana, of our kaiaulu, and our lahui by making incremental steps to achieving this vision of a healer in every home?
So what I see in our community is that everybody has a potential, but they're so busy with daily life that they're not allowed. And so, wise words of Casey Jackson, you know, they're so busy making a living to put food on the table that they don't have the time to allow their true gifts to emerge. And so I feel like that's how our society is. And if we just step back and allowed everybody's gifts and their healing knowledge and their healing practices to emerge, we'd have a much healthier lahui. And that's our goal in the end. But if we continue to not recognize or allow for the gifts and the healing to occur, then we're going to continue on the same trajectory.
I think the question should be, how are we seeing the change now? Not will we see it, but we're seeing it now. And we're seeing it now. You know, we're seeing it now. We're seeing it now. We're sitting here talking about this, you know. We're seeing it now in people making a commitment. Ka'ai's over there in the back of the room, you know, and he's doing lomi lomi over there. But it's like young people like that, you know, they just graduated, they just became, you know, they're doing practice already. So it's like that is growing. The community of healers are growing. It's not staying stagnant, but it's growing. And that's the kind of impact that I think is being made. In terms of, I think one of the places we're lacking is the food, right? I watched this panel thing on TV, and I was really disappointed. They didn't have a Hawaiian person there. They talked about food from the perspective of sustainability, but it's also a big part of it is, how do we make money on this? You know, not how do we feed people? How do we sustain the aina? You know, how do we grow the food? That kind of stuff. And I think that mentality needs to change, and I think it's going to be, you know, us Kanaka Maoli that changes it. Because we're the ones that are at the forefront. We're the ones that are saying, you know, we need more aina to grow this. We need more water to feed the plants and things like that. And we can see that. We can see that in our community. You know, before COVID, one of the things that was really interesting in COVID, If you're kapuna like me and you stay home in the evening, right, you put the TV on. And before, I never had too many Hawaiian programs. Now, get Hawaiian programs, you know? And it was like, there's that kind of visibility that is occurring, and we need to continue to make that, to make Hawaiian perspectives, Hawaiian healing, Hawaiian voices more visible. You know, and things like this, right, more visible. So you go from here, those of you who are here, you go from here and you talk about what you saw tonight. And hey, how do we make this more visible? You know, these are Kanaka talking about their healing practices and what they do. And how do we make this and who they are more visible? And how do we I don't want to get too much into this, but you know, how do we expand the idea of the need for more of what is Hawaiian in Hawaii? Because this is the only place we call home, you know? And how do we do that? And it cannot just come from us as a Hawaiian community. It's gotta come from other people. And like this venue tonight, yeah, that is being made possible for us to be here. Mahalo.
You just do them. Yeah, you go find some money, you go learn, and then you go do them. I think it's important, you know, in our Hawaiian community, our sovereignty is always on the forefront. And that's really, I'm going to just call that out because that's really the root of our sickness and the discourse in the challenges that we see is because of the question of our sovereignty to our lands. So I was going to say that. But I'm also going to say that the importance of having a healer in every home, like I shared with you folks earlier, we all had that. We all come from healers. Each one of us sitting here tonight come from people that were healers. And it is imperative that you find whatever that kuleana is. So in my ohana, that's me, right? But you cannot just look at that particular facet as like, I have a healer. Healing can be on a multitude of a spectrum. And when I say that, I give you an example because my son is that. My son in our family, he do ulana lauhala. He's a weaver. I don't do weaving, right? My ex-wife don't do weaving, but he does. And that is a form of healing when you reclaim your kuleana, when you reclaim your practice, when you reclaim your cultural identity. That's the healing. And so while tonight we're focusing on healing as traditional healing practices within the home, and how do we get it? That's a loaded question because it's a multi-pronged approach that you have to take. It's policies that are set up to negate that mindset, right? It's many of us being trained and educated in a way that we think that health is found in a doctor's office. We must wait until we get to a point of being so sick and disconnected, then we find it from somebody else rather than looking within our own hale for the answers and for the healing. We have to be reprogrammed. We have to take responsibility of reprogramming not just ourselves, but ensuring that we break that colonial impact, that historical generational trauma to the next generation. And so we must be bold, we must be innovative, and we must not be in the face of fear. Fear is important because it keeps you alert, but too much of it, you're not gonna move, right? And so we must move. There is an urgency. If there was anything like COVID, there was a reality for all of us was You couldn't go out of the house you were too scared to go to the hospital or to the clinic. And so had we had that capacity in our homes to heal ourselves, that knowledge again, like Ka'yu said, we cannot forget what we just went through. Because you know what? We live in a global world. It could happen again. History repeats itself. This is not the first time a pandemic, epidemic has hit our islands. It will happen again. And where will we be? Will we be prepared to take that on? Is your family going to be in a position to be able to heal each other within the home? We cannot wait for that to happen. It is our responsibility, it is your responsibility. And right now we live in a society that we rely heavily on institutions and governmental constructs. In Hawaiian mana'o, if you have a strong family, you're going to produce strong individuals. If you get strong individuals, they're no longer reliant on the society, governmental constructs anymore. They're giving to community rather than taking from community. So it starts in the home. Healing the home, healing the family, providing mana, providing ike, knowledge and wisdom in the home is where it's going to start. That's how you're going to heal the society. Right? It is the one place that for us as Native Hawaiians, we still have sovereignty. Because once I close that door, what I choose to teach, what I choose to eat, that's on me. Right? I have that sovereignty. Right? And so we all have a responsibility to enforce that kapu. And I'm going to say that piece because kapu is critical to well-being. Kapu are areas where it protects each of our mana. Mana is cultivated when one has kapu in place. When you break the kapu, when anything is no, I can do anything I like, then you're going to see sickness and discourse and chaos start to happen. When you provide those kapu again, you begin, you reenact and build upon the mana for future generations. So it is about us becoming disciplined again. It is about us reclaiming that mana, not having to ask or wait for it to come, but just go and do it, right? So, yeah.
So mahalo to our guests for joining us at Tutu's Kitchen this evening. Mahalo for your mana'o, mahalo for your mo'olelo, mahalo for this potent discussion and medicine, which was healing. Mahalo to Bishop Museum, mahalo to Kumuhina for your courage and inspiration. And just as we started with our future, we are going to end again with our future by Hiʻikapu offering a hakamele.
I am Ahaino, I am Kaupapalo Yoka Amala. I am Kalamaula, I am Anahaki. I am Haupukele. I am Moroka Inuia Hina. I am my tutu Karini who made healing tea. I am my tutu Vash who lomid Huliopu. I am my tutu Kanoa who loves her family. I am my papa Kanoa, Alavea. I am my papa Iraf, a hard worker. I am my mom who serves her community. I am my dad, Kanaka Hoeva'a. I am Tutu Ku'ume Aloha, who encouraged my mama in college. I am Tutu Ka'yu, the mama of Uncle Manu and Auntie Ku'ipo, who helped my mama when I was born. I am Uncle Opunui, who is a kauka oiwi for our lahui. I am Uncle Keola, who is a kahuna la'au lapa'u. I am my ohana, I am my kumu, I am a healer, I am a kanakaoiwi, I am a kaholakahiki, I am Mauliola no na hanauna, I am my kupuna stream. Mahalo.
Mahalo kako, mahalo to Ka'ai for that pule. It was important to me to end with that pule because that pule was written and composed by our very own. I'm gonna claim her. I always gonna claim her. And my good friend Hina Wangkalu, who, like I shared earlier, was the impetus of Kapaemahu that have brought the mo'olelo forward of the 4 healers from Tahiti, and the role that Mahu have played historically in our ohana and in our community, and the importance that they have as we move forward. So mahalo to you, Hina, for this space and creating this opportunity. Aloha.
Thank you guys so much for all that knowledge. I actually was curious about the stones and the balance between the masculine and feminine energy, and how, like, as healers, if you guys have any experience with people that have been kind of struggling with that balance and integrating the masculine and feminine to like embrace their healing gifts. I know I did walk through the exhibit and I noticed a lot of stories about like people maybe transitioning from genders, but I didn't see a lot of stories about like more heterosexual people who were balancing their gender, like masculine and feminine, if that makes sense. So I was wondering if you could touch on that.
Kapaemahu is one of many mo'olelo that we have here in Hawaii that I think future generations have a responsibility to bring their mo'olelo forward. And so yes, there's many mo'olelo in our history and healing aspects. As far as the ku and hina, that is a critical piece in understanding healing, because healing, mastery of Hawaiian healing is mastery of the hina aspect. we like to think, especially us men and the work, the crowd of men that I'm around and the work that I do with Ahakane, we love to think that we are the most strongest, and but when you really learn healing at the higher levels, you understand that you must become masterful of the female energy. Because female energy has the natural ability to bring life forth, right? And when you look at healing I'll try and explain it in a real simple form. We have the physical the physical body, right? That's the ku. And to balance out the ku energy, you have the spiritual aspect, which is the hina. You also have the mental cognitive side, which is the ku side, and balancing that off is the emotional side, or the hina side. So there's a balance that is always there, but the ability to see the unseen and to heal what has not manifested into the physical realm is the ability to embrace the unseen aspects. That is the realm of hina. Right? When the sun sets and Po comes into play, that is Hina space, right? And so the physical is the easy part, like I was sharing earlier. To heal the physical part is easy, but also you're too late. You want to catch it when it's in the unseen realm, when sickness starts to derive in the mental, emotional, and spiritual realms. You want to catch it earlier. And you must be very sensitive to that, to be able to see, and because you're not going to always see it, you got to feel it, right? And you got to feel and see and hear the unseen. It is in the unseen masterfully, like to master the unseen realms of the physical, the emotional, mental, and spiritual. To master those realms and to catch the disconnect early on, implores you to have a really good handle on the hina, the hina energy, because that is the life-giving energies right there. So earlier, Hina and I were outside talking about that, and which is why many of our mahu, have the ability to have potent mana in healing, because they walk the two realms in the middle, which is what I'm sharing with you. It is much harder for somebody like me. I must work twice as hard. So it's good to recognize the weaknesses that I have so I can work on those, right? But understanding ku and hina and finding that play between the two, because there's times you must be more hina, sometimes you must be more ku, and knowing when to push and pull between those two facets, because it's not about you as the healer or the practitioner, it's about what that individual may need. So that individual may need more hina or more ku, right? And everything in between. So you must have a pretty wide spectrum of skill sets to find that balance again for that person.
Aloha, mahalo so much. Mahalo nui loa. My name is Dee Dangada and I'm from Wahiawa. I love where we ended with kapu as, hold on, just finding my notes. Kapu as critical to well-being, and I'm thinking about it related to food and ho'oponopono and the home. Could you give some concrete examples of some of the kapu you needed to reinstate? So what boundaries for our gut for food? What are some things we might need to take out? For ho'oponopono, there's probably some kapu with how spaces occur and how you create safe ho'oponopono possibilities. I think some of that can look really Western and think, I'm a lawyer, and one thing that with domestic violence is often trying to protect the survivor from having to interact with the person who caused harm. But I know from restorative justice and ho'oponopono that's preventing healing. but how do you balance that kapu there? And with things like being disciplined in the home, and I'm thinking TV turn off through Thursday, no video games until weekend. I don't know what kind of examples you would point us to for using that to really restore our mana. Thank you.
So I can speak a little bit about food, and just kapu regulated everything we did. Like I said, from the how you got it, to how you prepared it, to how you ate it. But for one simple story, it's the story of the poi bowl on the table. And that poi bowl was on the table, and as long as that poi bowl was there and represented Hālau, you never talked business, you didn't say anything negative. And if you were eating and someone started to say something, you covered the bowl because you didn't want to be an affront to your God. So we had different kapu that really regulated. Well, it seems like it's regulating food. It's really regulating behavior. It's regulating taking care of the environment. It's regulating relationships. And so when Keola's talking about everything, that the kapu gave us this sense of order. It gave us this sense of what do I need to do? How do I need to take care of it? And we have very little in our lives nowadays, especially keiki. They're given, all this freedom. When you have these kapu in place, it teaches them how to react, how to behave, how to treat each other. And those are what we're trying to get back to.
In Ho'oponopono, initially, there's interviews that are held so that you hear from each member of the family what their perspective is for why they need to have this Ho'oponopono. And in that, of course, you will hear the different perceptions, and sometimes what happens is you begin to hear some of the deeper problems that are occurring. It then gives you, as the Haka Ho'oponopono, kind of two things too, because one of the things you ask is, how have you restored pono in the past, right? Because every family has done that. You don't just not solve your problems and they go away, but every problem, every ohana has the ability to restore pono in their family. So you ask that question to find out what has worked for them in the past up to this point and why it's not working now. Your question about domestic violence or things related to that, the family always knows that when I go into a situation, it's like this is a safe space. And I will not allow anybody to be hurt. And can we all agree to that, And the family knows that there's something wrong and wants to heal that. And nobody wants anybody else to be hurt. Sometimes, though, you have to oki that person. But when you get to that point, that's a very, 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 very serious place to be, because to oki someone, everybody has to be committed to that, and that person has to know that's what the ohana is saying. And only the ohana can decide what can bring that person back. So I hope that answers your question in terms of that. Mahalo. Mahalo for the question.
Maybe one more question if there are any.
Thank you. And thank you folks tonight. And one of the things that I was hearing as kind of a continuing thread through everything that you folks were saying is working against these influences that often come from outside, and outside of the community and outside of our islands here. And for me, I see three substantial malign influences affecting Hawaii. I see warmongering, I see capitalism. I see global warming and environmental depredations that we here, no matter how united we might be in Hawaii, cannot necessarily affect a change in how these things affect life here. And as healers, how do you face those larger influential malignancies, from my point of view, in these islands, which are, very dear to all of us, and I feel we need to protect, and you feel undoubtedly we need to protect. Thank you.
That's such a hard question. Like, there's so much to it. And you have to have hope, right? You have to have hope. Otherwise, you watch global warming, you watch people fighting, you watch not being able to control your own aina, the place where my ancestors are buried beneath this earth, and just watching it crumble. You always have to have hope. And, a good friend of ours, Kale Nu'uhiva, every morning at 8:30, she gathers whoever joins in, and we do healing prayers, not just for ourselves, but for our community, for the earth, for the world, every day at 8:30. And this has been going on for, I want to say, maybe a year, and we're in week 124. How many weeks is that? 52, over 2 years. And it's one of the things that gives me hope, but also in doing the Pule and Oli, you're looking at the wisdom of our kupuna and you're finding the answers. How do you respond to these things? Because some of it is cycles too, right? And even for COVID, what are it's a new disease, but there are things from the past that it holds within it. So what are the la'au? What are the pule? What are those things that we can learn from our kupuna and doing these pule and oli today that are going to help us move forward?
And two, it's like, do you do healing this much, or you do healing that much? It's like your healing is just not confined to who you're working with, but it also is about your healing for the larger, bigger picture. How am I helping to heal the aina? How am I helping to heal, to give my voice, to use my position to say something in the community that I hope will make a difference, those kinds of things. So the healing is not just like this, but it's like that. And how big is the feet you leave? If we're eating and we're using plastics, how are we contributing to the destruction of the aina? So we've got, as healers, we have to look at those things too, not just what we're doing here in terms of helping to heal people, but the larger picture also.
I would respond to that by saying, I teach traditional healing, and they come to my classes for to learn, right? All these la'au or lomi, these healing traditions. But the entire first year, they learn none of that. The entire first year is about healing themselves. So my response to you is get all these global issues that took centuries for us to get to this point, right? It was because we were not in touch with we lost ourselves in capitalism, we lost ourselves in this society. When I was saying to you that it's important that we take responsibility, is that in that first year is about healing the healer. You cannot heal nobody if you have nothing to give. And if you're going to give, you're not going to have much. And you're going to burn out yourself. So you must really start from a place of within, looking within, assessing, and beginning the healing process with yourself and your own family, right? Because like I was sharing with you, if you have a strong family, then you have individuals that can go out and infuse that healing to others, right? That can help others get to where you at. And eventually, right, we can have a collective movement that is starting to affect the greater issues happening on a societal global level. But we cannot expect the next person to do them or just talk about, oh, this is the problem. We know what the problem is. But we don't look within to see how am I contributing to that, right? How generationally educated and colonial influences have shaped the way that I behave that adds to that, right? And it takes an honest look, and it takes honesty to say what I can actually take on right now, right? And that's part of the healing, the healer, is knowing what is your capacity. Because it would be nice we turn the whole world around tomorrow, but we know that cannot happen necessarily, because we still are ingrained with certain sicknesses. So we must begin the healing, and if we can heal the healer, then we can eventually have the healer in the home that can eventually become the healer in the community, right? And that's the goal that we want to attain, is that in the community we have individuals that is taking care of the aina, have a relationship to the aina, and can see those tweaks that we must all make to get there. Yeah.
Wow. To our esteemed panelists, mahalo nui o kopakahi apau no kahele ana mai a ka hoike na mai ko o ko mau mo'olelo, o ko mau ike me mako apau, mahalo anui. To our audience in person, to our audience online, mahalo for joining us for this amazing conversation and talk by our esteemed panelists this evening. We have the Kapaemahu children's book that was produced by our co-curators back there. For those of you in person, please stop by if you want to make a purchase. Our exhibition is open till October 16, 2022. Please come and visit us at this time. And then for those of us, just to honor the ike that was shared by our ohana over here, whether you're online or you've captured some photography or video, please use them for yourselves and yourselves alone, out of respect for the ike that's been shared. And anything beyond that, the museum asks you directly meet with one of our healers to ask permission to sharing beyond your own ike for yourselves and for your ohana. So again, on behalf of the museum, mahalo anui, and to our next program, malama, aloha.